Oh yeah. I was just looking at the YouTube and it's not live for me yet. That's why I was a little confused. But okay, okay, it's fine. Yeah, I've been doing good, despite the chaos that we're all in. But yeah, it's been great. Yeah. People have been asking this for a long time. I mean, this is kind of like my one redeeming skill that keeps uh coming back that people keep actually like me for. Uh yeah, I mean it's really simple. Really. There is actually a tutorial made by someone, I don't recall their name, years ago that is similar to what I do. We must have found out the same workflow at around the same time. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm just gonna start streaming my cinema window to you. Oh no.
With technical issues. Right now, people should hear me. Hey guys, can you hear me?
I think I was able to hear you when I had this done.
Hey, hey, hey. Can you hear me, guys?
Oh god, they actually can't hear you. That's funny.
I think this should be okay. Yes, perfect. Happy to see
Okay.
you there, Stuart. So yeah, as I said,
I was just talking to myself. That's great.
yeah, every live comes with a lot of technical issues. It will not be a real live without technical issues.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm using my Oculus Rift as a microphone because nothing else seems to work. So, let's start there. It's been pretty funny, the preparation for this.
Yeah, I think it's
If you want
it's
to
a
call it
nice
funny.
it's a nice day. So, are you ready to share your screen?
Sure, sure. So I'm gonna do this in cinema.
Perfect.
Theoretically, this works really anywhere. Um, it's a simple concept. You can do this in Houdini. You can do this in Blender. I'm pretty sure. So what you're looking at here is just a 3D model of a building, right? Everybody can see that. Um, I'm just gonna turn the grid off here. So what I start with is basically I take a photo, right, as parallel as possible of a building. This is one way how I make these textures. Um, you take that picture and then you just flat project it onto a plane. So like you would take a plane and you would just take a material, put it on the plane, um, make sure that it's like frontal. Oh god, why is because the texture is probably not linked properly. Let me use this one instead. So this one's by default on a plane. It's just stretched. So you make the plane the size of the texture, whatever you kind of like. Let me make this editable, just so it's about the same aspect ratio, and then you just start modeling on it. And because it's projected through, if you put this in a group, like so, like here it is in a group, you can have models in there that are separate, and when you move them around, the texture always gets projected through. So this is how you kind of set up your model, and you just put everything in the right place, so it's about what you would expect. And when you're done with that, you have a gradient. And in Cinema, what you can do is you can have this texture coordinate box, right? So if I rotate this, it changes how my texture is projected. So this is just a flat projection, like so, of a gradient. And the cool thing in Cinema is you can just say fit to object. And if I press fit to object, it asks me, you want sub-objects to be included, and I say yes, and then it just takes all of these objects that I've modeled, and it wraps the box around that. And that's basically all you need, and then you just render that. You have a camera here that's set up orthographically, and you hit R. That's really all it is. That's the simplest way to do them. What you do need is this is kind of like a more custom cinema setup for rendering. So I'm using the standard render engine, and you have to turn off a bunch of stuff that would get in the way. I only have textures turned on here, and my output set to a resolution. You can really do whatever you want, because this is going to render super fast. And anti-aliasing I have set to triangular, just because it's a linear anti-aliasing. It doesn't do any sharpening, because obviously you want just the data. You want the cleanest data you can get, and this is the cleanest data you can get. So this is how you can make displacements from like planar objects. This is not doing any baking. This is not doing anything like that. Because I always see people baking planar objects in ZBrush, and I just ask myself why they do that, because you could just do this. You can also do this, I mean, this is essentially the same thing as doing UVs, right? It's like as if you took this object and you just projected UVs from this side. That's basically all there is to it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Thanks for showing us this really nice workflow. Actually, it looks really more simple than expected.
And the even cooler thing is that you can have floaters, right? So because this repeats, like if you take this, these are the textures for my recent Industrial Guts displacement pack that I made together with Solid Carbon, who is Italian, and he's currently in very hard isolation. So because this texture here repeats like this, right? So it repeats here, and then because I have it turned to seamless, so it invert repeats just above it, and then it repeats normal again. So this thing is at the same position as if it was, I think, like 200 centimeters below right here. And in the final view, it just kind of overlaps with it. So it has a lower value even though it's floating above it, because that projection repeats up here again. So I could have a darker thing that kind of pools into the object without actually pooling anything. It's just the way the values get applied.
That's a pretty cool
really
workflow. I think there's some ways to do exactly the same thing in Houdini with the COP network, the image network. Like you have vision from the top, and you can set gradients to create textures from just geo.
Yeah.
So pretty interesting. I will be curious, like if you have the time to show us like the process in itself, even on a small object. Like you start with an image and you create with us a small displacement.
Yeah, sure. I have. I can set this up real quick. Hold on. I'm currently working on a tower block set of displacement maps. So like Hong Kong tower blocks. I got in touch with a photographer from there, and I'm going to be turning that into a set of textures. So let me just make a group here. Get a plane in here. This one's cubic, so this one's like the same size. I think these are 2K by 2K or something like that. You really don't need much more detail. I see a lot of people that always play around with like, oh, every map needs to be 4K and everything. But the truth is, if you have like really sharp maps, like something that you would get out of Substance Designer or something like that, because those are pixel sharp, right? Because you're computing every pixel. 4K, that's like a lot of detail. That's a lot of pixels. So a lot of the time, 4K is my high end, and 2K is more like the normal stuff that I work with, because I don't find to actually need that much raw detail. So this is how you do that. So when you put a material on a group, right? it automatically applies it to everything within that group. So here, I'm not going to use UV mapping, obviously, because that's not going to work. I use flat, and now it's projecting it flat from this angle. I have to rotate this. Usually I just reuse a texture tag from a previous object, but to set this up properly, I rotate it by 90 degrees. And then again, the golden feature here is fit to object, and it'll just automatically fit it perfectly. So now I have this object, and now I can make a cube, for example, and I just drag that cube into the group, and I scale it down. And now you can put that cube like over here where the air conditioner is. And you'll just kind of like fit it to where the air conditioner is. Start doing some poly modeling. I'm not the fastest modeler, so I'm probably not gonna like model this entire map out here, but you understand what I'm getting at. And then you just go into the plane. Well, this plane isn't set up correctly. Just get this. Just go into the plane and go into the top view, for example, and use the line cut tool, and you can start cutting out like windows. And I have my texture here set in the material settings. I have my texture set that to sampling none. So what that does is by not having any sampling, I can see the pixels, right? And that makes it a little bit easier to approximate where objects are actually ending and beginning in my texture. So I know where this window is. I can just kind of cut this out and do like an inner extrude and then bevel that outwards and do the same, and then bevel it back inwards down here to make that window, and da-da-da. And then at the end, I can have a polygon selection of these. So I have polygon selections bound to a shortcut for me. So perhaps if you've ever merged two objects with different materials, you know this icon up here. That's a polygon selection. So you can use polygon selections to put materials on there. If I name this 1 and I name this 1, then only this thing's going to be white. And I can use that to kind of designate where the windows are.
Yeah.
And that's how I render my window map. So this is, you can also paint those later, but
Hey, I will just ask a question as we got them in the chat. Janice just asked, where did you fit the texture to the object? He didn't saw that correctly.
oh, can you not see that? Oh my God, you can't see the thing in cinema. You can't see the thing on a screen recording. That's kind of terrible. Let me see if I can. No, probably can't share that. Just that Discord screen recording, a little bit bad. So if you you can't see that here, I didn't know that. If you click on an object or on the group, right? Can you see that I have highlighted the thing at the top here, the null? You should be able to see that.
Yeah.
Like yellow.
We see that.
If you right-click on that, there's a drop-down menu, and I can send you a screenshot. I guess this is terrible. So if you right-click on the texture, you can press Fit to Object. I'm gonna have to send you a screenshot of this now, and you're gonna have to open it somehow on the screen.
Yeah, so you right-click to a texture tag, and then you click like to.
And then it says fit to object. It's somewhere down there. It's just below the UV controls, and
yeah, okay.
It says it right there. So it's I didn't know that the stream doesn't show drop-down menus in cinema. That's.
I think you need to do a complete screen share instead of just doing
Well, I have a really big screen. People are just not going to see anything. Okay, I mean we can try that.
Yeah, let's try. And
close a few other things.
If it's too bad, we'll come back to the classical.
All right, I'll be right with you.
Yeah.
Change windows. I can share my screen. Hold on, I'll share it in a little bit higher quality. PDP. Can you see that? Okay, so it's a little bit big. I can make the cinema window bigger, but I don't know if that's going to help much. So up here, now you can see the context menu. Here it says Fit to Object. Maybe you can on your end, like zoom into that. What does it look like on YouTube? Oh, okay, you can zoom into it. Can you?
Yeah, I think it's a bit small. Try to adapt your
Okay.
screen ratio. Should be better.
Ooh, display settings. God. Scale and layout. 350%. Oh, it's too big.
Woohoo!
200%, maybe that's enough. All right.
That's perfect.
Yeah, this perfect for you, terrible for me. Okay. Um, okay. I'm just gonna have to work with this. Yeah. I mean, basically there isn't that much more to this anymore. So up here you have the fit to object thing. Uh, what is there anything else that you guys weren't able to see? In the texture, when I went to sampling, that's right here. If you go in Cinema, I'm using normal Cinema shaders here. You can do this in Octane. In Octane, you would just have to use either the diffuse pass or the Z pass at, I suggest, 32-bit, and then put that into Affinity Photo for Photoshop. I don't know how good the 32-bit controls in Photoshop are. I haven't used that program in a while. But and then you just have to like clamp it, contrast it down to that area, which here this is automatically being done obviously by getting this gradient in here and just saying fit to object. Just automatically fits it to it, and as you can see, you get this depth map here. And I have my camera set up here, and then I can just render. Well, now I'm rendering other things too. Hold on. And then I just have this rendered, right? And usually I would have this kind of like be scaled to the about the exact dimensions of my render, and then I would have my render be 4K map or something, and then I can just perfectly continue working with that. That's really all there is to that. Um, Anything else? I'm thinking. Well, I mean, it's a lot of modeling, right? So the reason I'm doing this is it's kind of more like a hobby, because when you look at things like, let me see if I have anything ridiculous here. Well, I mean, this one was pretty crazy. This one took me a little bit of a time. That's like a lot of modeling. If I turn the wireframe on here, uh, there's a lot of things here that take a little bit more care. And the most annoying thing isn't even really the modeling. The most annoying thing is that you have to make sure that you have enough divisions that your displacement is smooth, especially in Octane, because Octane uses I mean, something like this is only really possible in Octane even, or other render engines that have like ray level render displacement that isn't really subdiff dependent. Like
Yeah,
in Blender, I think there's only subdiff displacement. You kind of get problems with that because a tile that has enough detail for something like this would take like millions of polygons, and that's not efficient, right? You would never do that.
yeah. You have few questions in the live actually. Mr. Dinkel Winkel asked, "How long have you been? How
I know
long?
that guy.
How long have you been making displacement maps?"
I think I started, might have started in like 2016, 2017, as soon as I got Octane, because I noticed that Octane displacements differently, and I kind of wanted to take advantage of that. It's been a while, yeah, and I know I've promised tutorials like for a long time, but I didn't have a microphone for the longest time, and I wasn't living on my own, stuff like that.
You still don't have
But
you're still using Oculus.
it's because my microphone just broke yesterday. It's like God struck me down. He didn't want this to happen.
Yeah, another question from Janice Richter asking, how long does it takes normally?
Well, see, that's the thing. This is not really like it's. You can make this efficient, obviously, if you do like lower poly, if you don't put that much effort into modeling, because you really don't need it sometimes. Like sometimes you don't need all these little details. It's just because I'm putting this out as a product. Obviously, it has to be as good as possible. Um, like all of these tiny things up here, which are like, wait, let me. Just this is like all the little things up here that I modeled out. So this is kind of where I stop modeling, right? Like the little crevices here, I don't model this anymore. But even then, like you have to make sure this is instanced over. This is an instance object, right? Like from this side. So if I change a poly here, it changes it on the other side because you have to make sure it's seamless. So I have this positioned at like well, it's in like a group that gets instanced, I think. Um, yeah, this is like the emblem up here, for example. I model this on one side, so I model it using the texture that loops on here, because obviously this projection of the image just loops on the other side as well. You model this out here, and then you just mirror it to the other side. But of course, this has to be like exact, because if you render it out and if you cut the image here, you can't have holes in Octane, because Octane, if there's a difference on the texture on one end, you will get a hole in displacement.
Yeah,
So
and
there's bonuses there, like there's ups and downs with Octane displacement, but
there's
it's you definitely can't do this anywhere else like this.
there's more question actually. Spencer Dickerson asked. Yeah, C4D is funny because it almost forces you to not model. Using Modo or 3ds, you rely on modeling more. So why you're using C4D?
I'm just using C4D because that's what I started with. Like I started in motion graphics. I'm not really in motion graphics anymore. And like I said, I started this setup like years ago, like in 2016, 2017. I started the setup, and not much really has changed about this workflow. I think this workflow was pretty much established in 2017, and since then I've only been like doing tiny adjustments to it, like doing a little bit of data control, because you have to be careful with your output. It has to be clean and everything. Those were things that I was fighting with over the time a little bit. You could set this up anywhere else. Cinema 4D modeling isn't great, I'll agree with that, but Cinema 4D also has things like the polygon pen, for example, which makes modeling a lot easier. Other software have polygon pens now too, but when that came out, that was really also what kept me going. Um, I'm not a huge fan of Cinema and Octane. It's not like the best combination on earth. I very much accept that, and uh, I kind of want to get away from it too. But for stuff like this, I just have this set up in Cinema.
Yeah.
That's really all there is to it.
Yeah, and for all the people that never saw like your displacement map in action, maybe you can do a small demo of
Sure,
how it works in
sure.
Octane.
I can go here into my testing area, and I actually have the thumbnail set up here still. Let's see if the Octane render settings are on, so I should be able to render this right in the viewport here. It's gonna take a while. The displacement takes a little bit of pre-computation. Actually, I could just turn on the live viewer, probably easier, on my huge screen. Okay, let's see about this, because then I'll have like a thing that I can navigate through a little bit. So another downside about displacements in Octane, or I guess anywhere else really probably, is that you need a little bit of time at the beginning when you load the scene for the first time for it to set up all the displacements.
Yeah, while it loads, I will ask more questions from the chat. Thanks, guys, for being active. That's really awesome to have an active community during the
Yeah,
live.
definitely.
Um, again, Mr. Dinkle Winkle is asking, what do you do as a jobs if it's hobby doing displacement?
For a job, I actually also do visuals, but I don't, like displacements aren't like the best thing to use when you're trying to crank out hundreds of frames for like a festival stage visual or something like that. Um, yeah, I'm actually a student. Like I still went to university in the last couple of months, and like the last 2 years I was at university, and and so on the side I do visuals. I've been doing that since 2016 as well, and right now it's a little bit empty. Right now I'm not doing much, but it's gonna come back again. But yeah, that's what I do on the side. And sometimes I do use displacements in visuals, but not a lot, like because it puts extra strain on the frame. And if you can render a frame in 1 minute, why would you do it in 1.5 minutes with displacement? You just slap some models in there and it's fine.
Yeah, it's really really cool to see your stuff in the Octane live viewer. More question. Someone is asking, what's the pros and cons of doing something like that in cinema, as opposed to Substance Designer?
Well, a big con with Substance Designer is that Substance Designer can only work in squares, right? So if you've ever used Substance Designer, you'll notice that all the textures are like 1020, like 1024 by 1024 or 2048 by 4096. So it's always in power by 2 increments because that's the most efficient way to store textures in video memory. And Substance is kind of more like almost for video game development, and in video games you very much so always use the power of 2 textures. But a lot of the textures that I make here, because buildings aren't always square. Like not every part of a building is square. Like the one in the center here is very much not square. I mean, this is like 2 stories and it's very tall. So this texture is, I think, 4,000 by 1,600. So it's not square, and I can't put this into Substance Designer like that. What you can do is you can take this image and you can go into Photoshop or Affinity. You can like make a canvas that's 4,000 by 4,000 and then like work on that. Um, Making buildings from photos, if that's what you were asking, is just inherently faster because you don't have to make the color channel, for example, or you don't have to come up with all the details. Like if I was making this building from scratch in Substance Designer, that would take even longer. If you've ever seen uh, like people making these huge elaborate Substance Designer graphs on ArtStation, like making huge buildings, that's like one project. Like one project is making that one building. And that's even more work than this, and this is already like a lot of work. But all you have to do is model here and then just render it out. You don't have to like know any Substance Designer tricks or anything. All you have to know is model and like take a texture out of software. So it's a very simple task in comparison to creating an entire building in Substance Designer.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. Another question is, since the Octane displacement looks really awesome with this technique, how will you do the same thing using the redshift displacement?
I'm actually not entirely sure how many different. I never did displacement in Redshift. I don't know how many different displacement algorithms it has. I think a while ago, the last time I checked, but this was I'm speaking like literally a year or two ago. I think it only had subdiv displacement. It might have something else. So what you're looking for when you want a lot of detail in your displacement, anything you're looking for is like you're looking for tessellation types of displacement. Uh, so tessellation displacement, or just something that takes your texture as a pixel input and kind of like displaces the pixels instead of instead of using the map to displace the geometry with it. Because like I said, subdiv displacement where you just increase the poly count, it's not going to help you so much with this. I've seen people use it, and I've seen people actually get good results with it. Um, Shout out to Tagapaw on Instagram. He has been doing a lot of displacement work in Blender with my displacements, and he's actually using Eevee, I think. So he found a way to do it because I don't think Blender has like tessellation or ray level displacement like Octane here, where you can really get really far down and you still have the same amount of detail. So it probably is possible, but these maps are definitely optimized for like ray level displacement techniques. I'm not sure what the feature set of Redshift is.
Uh, a question from one of our lovely Discord member. Um, Jazz Jazzco, sorry for this bad accent, is asking, is scanning and baking more efficient than this whole workflow, since he know
Absolutely.
you need some scans?
This map actually right here. Thank you for asking that. That's a good question. This map right here, the cathedral like map. Uh, this was actually done from a scan because I wanted to do something like this, but I also realized that I would be insane if I were to model all of this. Especially if you start looking at the people, like these statues right here. Like I'd have to sculpt that. No, I don't want to sculpt that. I don't want to do that to myself. So I've been scanning for a while too. And all you really need to do then, that's even easier. But I have to open a separate file here because I did that in a separate file. Let me just look for that. Scan, scan, scan. I'm scanning a lot. Resources. Don't steal my resources. Okay, thanks. Okay, where is it? Where is it? There it is. So it's still the same setup. It's still just like you have the model, and I just cut and kind of like stuck them into each other to make them tileable. And then it's the same thing again with like putting the gradient on there. And let me disable the windows here. Like it's the same thing again with putting the gradient on here and then just rendering that out. And that's wait, I have this disabled. It's the same thing again with just rendering this out and like making it tileable in Affinity or Photoshop. Just paint the edges out, or actually here because I have them next to each other, I would just like cut the image here and then just like offset it again. So this is like on the edge and whatever. So yeah, it's scanning in itself is like an entirely different thing. Again, if you want to get started with scanning, I recommend Reality Capture. It's not a free program, but it's the best program approved by a lot of people that I've worked with. Every time somebody uses something that isn't Reality Capture, I'm just like, try this out. And I haven't had a single like negative response yet. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. This is just my opinion. Really love that program.
Mark is asking, what resolution are you scanning at?
I'm using a Canon 200D, and it shoots at 24 megapixels, but I usually scale those down to 3000 by 2000. And in Reality Capture, something like that will usually get you a pretty nice result. Like this is done with 3000 by 2000 images, and like you saw in the displacement map, I mean, it looks just normal. Like at a decent distance, it just looks like a building.
Yeah, it looks pretty awesome. Really glad that you show all those techniques to the community.
Yeah, sure. Empowering creators.
Exactly. So for all the people currently in the chat, if you're not on Discord, you can actually join the MDC Discord, where we're pretty active every day. You'll find a bunch of different talks, general industry news. We share some news about cool new tools. I said we, but mostly Yuya, our lovely moderator. And yeah, you can just get feedback,
Yeah.
share your works, and many cool things there. So feel free to join us on the Discord if it's not the case. And yeah, back to your screen, Chrome.
This was actually all modeled. This was a really dark time. I spent a lot of time on this. Like I said, this isn't like you probably shouldn't dedicate a good chunk of if you have like an allotted time for a project that you have to get out, this technique is probably not the fastest thing. I mean, it can be fast. Like I said, you can cut corners, but if you want to go in this far, probably just better off buying a cheap model off CG Trader or something like that. I mean, it depends how fast you are as a modeler as well, obviously. I mean, if you got like some fast modeler skills, then this is probably not going to be much of a problem for you, but you might as well do them from scratch at that point because you're not going to have to deal with doing the tiniest micro adjustments for the differences in real things. like I remember when I was doing all of these little leaves here that are like between the they're like in these tiny holes. There's these little leaves, and those are modeled as well. And I remember every time I copy pasted that object, I had to fix like so many points because it was just a little bit different. Um, I mean, at the end, like the result, I'm still very happy with. Can't really be not satisfied with that, but
Yeah, Chrome, do you have anything that you want to show in addition to that to the community?
um, I don't know. I don't know anything off the top of my head. So much going on in my head.
Yeah, I don't know because some people are still active there, so I think if we would show something during 5 or 10 more minutes, it will be great.
Sure. I mean, anybody else have any questions? So what I also do here, here's another thing, right? If you want to create things from scratch, like this, making displacements, it's not all about, taking photos or even taking scans. Like you can make your own models too. So, um, hold on right here. What I've also done once, these I haven't published anywhere, but making these displacements, which this is the displacement that I'm using in one of my artworks. Can I pull that up? Let me just see if I can pull that up. There it is. So this artwork, I think many of people might be familiar with. Um, Here you kind of have all of these surface details, and that's also done with displacement, right? But this map isn't like taken a photo of or anything. This is modeled, right? So this is this map actually, and it's the same thing again, where you can make these, like, these are pretty simple shapes modeling wise. Well, doesn't look so simple now. The one thing that you have to watch out with an Octane is that you have enough rounding, you have enough details, because obviously with it being ray-based displacement, you're going to see all of those details. And if you don't give this rounding like enough subdivisions, you're going to have problems there. You're going to see the polygons and the displacement because you're just going to have that much detail in Octane. The same with the pipes. With the pipes, you just have to be very high poly. But here, I just suggest using splines and then like wrapping it along the spline. That's going to make it easier to model that out. So you can make like normal displacement maps too, where you just get a lot of surface greeble, right? Like in 3ds Max, people are usually projecting geometry onto models. You can't do that in Cinema. So if you're using Cinema and Octane, this is like the next best thing. You can kind of use displacement to create these surface greebles. Um, and one of my recent artworks, uh, I also was using a lot of displacement and using uh, I have an AO pass of that here. So all of these surface details you see here, that's all displacement. And then I have another layer on top of that, uh, which is purple here. So the purple layer that you see here is another layer of different displacement, but also with an opacity map. So that kind of gives you like a scaffolding look, like a cladding look to the building, as if you had even more details, like all of the stuff that's like sticking out up here and over here. That's all that additional displacement layer with the opacity, and that, like, this entire building is really, there's not much of this is modeled. This is almost entirely a cube, right? But because of the displacement in Octane, you can push so much detail into that, and that's why people have been like a lot of concept artists, like Paul Shadeson, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, for example, he's been doing a lot with Octane, and he uses displacements all the time, and it just gets you so much detail so quickly.
Yeah, just had a question. So Mr. Dinkelwinkle asked the total amount of polygon count.
On this, well, it's luckily at the end of the day, polygon count doesn't matter for displacements with tessellation or Octane, but this might be like, I don't know. Let me check. There's a bunch of subdivided stuff in here too. Let me just deselect these. How much is just this? There's a bunch of instance stuff. 700,000 polys on this tile. But that's mostly because, like I said, you have to do a lot of subdivisions on like anything that's round. Because if you want a clean result on those areas, it's just best you do like a little bit of light subdiv modeling, even maybe. Like these things are subdiv modeled, but you don't have to do that. This thing is also subdiv modeled, and like because you have to imagine that when you take this texture out and you put it into Octane and you have like a displacement that has a 4K resolution, right? So Octane will sample the displacement map at 4K and then displace it using that information. So you have to like have details that are sub-pixel in size. Like they have to be smaller than a pixel. Because any detail that's bigger than a pixel, you're gonna start to see like the flat polygons, which is fine in some areas like here where you want this 45-degree angle on the plating. Like this you can leave. You don't have to put a bevel on here if you don't want to. Um, but anything like this, like the rounding around here, you have to have a lot of pulleys. Or in here. I just spooled this in actually, but in some areas you're just going to need more pulleys. But it's going to look good. Like this is a very good technique if you're working in Octane, and especially if you're only doing still renders. If you're doing animation, it might be that some parts of Octane are just a little bit not stable enough to. Sometimes it might crash. I mean, that's nobody ever heard of Octane crashing, but I'm just saying it might happen.
There's a
Um,
question from Spencer asking if the Octane tag would works. I don't know if it works on displacement maps.
I'm not entirely sure what he means with that. The Octane tag, like
Yeah,
just the Octane object tag, this green thing here.
yeah. I don't think it's actually subdiv like displacement.
No, no. There's no. Does it even have? Oh, you can do subdivision here. No, the way you do displacement in Octane is you have this. If you go into an Octane material, you have the displacement here, and you just add displacement, and it just shows you a level of detail thing because uh, I'm not like that technically smart about these things, but I think what it does is it like tries to create a. It's not like voxels, but it's sort of similar to voxels if you can imagine it that way. Like it creates a field of displacement. It's not subdiff. It's a different type of displacement. Octane doesn't have subdiff displacement. A lot of people have been complaining about that for years, or maybe the new versions do. But I'm still on version 4. Um, But if you just use the traditional displacement, which they've made, maybe they've made changes to it, I'm not sure. But in version 4, it was still like this. I hope they didn't remove it because it's a really powerful way of displacing things. Um, but yeah, it's not using subdiff. It's just you just put it into the material and then it's just on there. There's not much control over it in Octane, sadly, but it works the way it works, and for that, these techniques are fine.
Yeah, Spencer saying instead of subd the polys before you render, you use it with the tag.
I'm not entirely sure what he means with that. I'm sorry.
I think you can like he's trying to say that you leave less detail and then when you render you add a tag or subd to it.
Yeah, if you want to do some optimization things, you can do that. There's no like uh, something that would also work with this technique is if you had adaptive uh, displacement, if that's what he means. Like in Blender, for example, you can have adaptive displacement. So the further you are away from the object, it's not going to put as many pulleys on it. But if you get really close, you're going to have like high resolution displacement here, but you're not going to be wasting a lot of VRAM or system memory on like having high quality displacement everywhere else. So these maps can also be used with adaptive displacement. It's just if you use just brute force uh, subdiff displacement, where you just have one tile and that tile has to be super high resolution all the time, then I don't suggest using this method. But if you're using adaptive displacement or tessellation of any kind, like even video game tessellation, if you've ever seen that in a video game where just something has kind of like a parallax effect to it, parallax mapping is another kind of way of doing that. in real-time engines. With these maps also work great for parallax mapping and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot of ways you can optimize this. It's not like you can only use this in Octane. That's not true. But a lot of offline CGI render engines just don't have like very these weird new. We live in an age where game engines can look pretty realistic, and some people have actually started rendering in game engines. Um, a lot of render engines that are offline, like Octane, just haven't caught up to that.
Hey, Mr. Dinkelwinkle is actually telling us that Octane has a stable version, so the V405 R7, and I'm not sure it's so stable. What do you think about stability of Octane, Chrome?
let's not get into that. I Yeah, no, I mean it's fine for the most part, unless you're trying to do like some outlander stuff where you're doing something that's weird. Like I was recently doing, I had like this really big surface that was like vertex cached, like every point was moving differently. Uh, it was like as if like a cloth simulation kind of, and on top of that I had displacement, and Octane was really struggling to render that for more than 10 frames without crashing. But that was actually mostly the denoiser's fault, I think. Like the denoiser just seems to crash or run out of memory or have like an overflow at some point. Um, I think the biggest problem with Octane is that a lot of people don't report, like including myself, when something crashes, you just don't report it. And I I know some of the Octane developers and some of the people at Otoy. They're genuinely like good guys. Like it's not like they're a bad company that doesn't want anything good for you. It's a render engine that can do a lot of things that other render engines just can't do. It has great global illumination. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm not here to like shit talk Octane, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a global problem, and we could advertise a bit people about that. But yeah, Adobe is also suffering a lot from the lack of crash report, and
Yeah,
it makes they notice that the community is trying to fix themselves the problems. So sometimes they are not even aware that something is crashing because they didn't add bug reports, because people
yeah.
try to find themselves a solution. So guys, if you're watching that, just take the time to send a bug report, even if in After Effects or whatever. It just helps the community of developers to work and create better products.
Or even better, go into the Otoy forums and I don't know, just write something into the forum. Someone's gonna see it eventually.
Yeah.
There was this really bad bug with displacement in the Cinema 4D plugin. I think that was like 2 years back or something, where because what you have to do now in Octane when you put an image into the displacement node is you have to set the image to 32-bit. Even if it's 16-bit, you have to set it to 32-bit because the displacement, because that decides like how much detail, how much depth you get in the actual displacement. So if you set the image interpretation to 16-bit, you actually get like stepping in it. You get that ugly stepping like you don't get smooth surfaces, smooth angles. You get like stepping because it doesn't have enough detail. And when that was first introduced, they like whoever develops the plugin forgot to include that in the plugin, and just two versions of Octane I think just had like really bad quality displacement, and nobody reported that, and then I reported it, and I'm not sure if I was the only person who reported it, but it got fixed after that. So please, guys, report bugs. Um, no need to clap. I'm just saying it really does help, and people really do fix things.
Yeah. Yeah, great thing. Report bugs, guys.
Yeah.
So Chrome, thanks a lot for your time today. Thanks a lot for sharing
Yeah,
all
no
that
problem.
awesome
Now I
techniques.
have a video that I can like send people to if they ask me how I do the displacements.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks again. Thanks again, everybody in the chat, and we'll see you later. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.